What is going on, Bucs fans? We are live for the first time here on the Pirate Parlay podcast on the Sick Podcast Network. Busy day for the Bucs. Press conferences, official signings at 4 p.m. All those signings or reported signings all went official. The trades went official. There were some free agents that came in here, free agents that left. We'll get into all of that. I'm joined with me tonight by my colleague over at Bucs Game Day, Caleb Skinner. We're going to break down all that, break down our thoughts on it, break down our thoughts on the press conference. What do the Bucs do from here? What's next? All that and more on the other side. See you in a minute.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Pirate Parlay.
Battle intercepted, picked off in the end zone. Bucs are going to beat the Chiefs. We're the champions of the world.
The sickest Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. It's going to be sick.
Welcome back. First time live, drop the comments. We'll put them up there. We'll read them. We'll interact with you. Love being live. We've been doing mostly tape shows. So this is a new one for us. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Twitter, feel free to just drop some comments in there and we'll get your thoughts up here. We'll talk about those. Any questions for certain, drop those in there. We'll get into it. But without further adu, let me bring in my co-host for the evening, Caleb Skinner of Bucs Game Day. Caleb, how are we doing?
I'm doing good, man. It's been a few good days actually for the Bucs. Excited to see. I've got my creamsicle jersey on. Excited with everything that's going on, even though it's mostly under the radar. A lot of people aren't necessarily talking about what the Buccaneers are doing, but that's because we're keeping most of our guys in-house. So looking forward to talking on it and seeing all of our perspectives.
Yeah, the Bucs went right to work. Jason Light said, his main priority was to bring back the core of this team, and they did just that. We talked about it last week with a re-signing of Mike Evans on that 2-year, up to $52 million contract. Then came the news just the other day, Baker Mayfield back in the fold, locked up with the Bucs on a 3-year, $100 million contract that can get up to $115 million. And we'll break that down a little bit more because those numbers are there, but they're kind of funny numbers. So we'll get into those as well. Obviously the signings kept coming. Chase McLaughlin was next, followed by Chase Edmonds, Greg Gaines, Levante David was brought back. And then the big one today, everyone's been clamoring for him. Jordan Whitehead back in a Bucs uniform on a 2-year, $9 million contract that can go up to 10. But we'll start with Baker because he was the next domino to fall and probably the most important domino to fall. He gets that 3-year deal worth $100 million. But the way they structured it, they've got multiple outs in this deal. So if they're not satisfied with his play this next season, they actually get out of it that first year. It cost them $40 million to do it, but they could get out of it. The second year, they'll have a big decision to make. He'll already made $60 million between those two, and he'll have that option for that third year. They can get out of it with relatively, no dead money, about $15 million on the cap, which isn't but it's, compared to what it could be. So they can do a lot of things with this deal. I thought it was an important piece to have for this Bucs when you looked at the landscape out there, especially at quarterback. The guys that were kind of available were Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew. I mean, Ryan Tannehill's still floating out there. Justin Fields I never really thought that was a trade candidate, and obviously Kirk Cousins was never coming here. So to get Baker locked up and to get him locked up before free agency was key for this Bucs team because he would have had suitors. There would have been people out there, but he gets that $100 million, which is a benchmark for quarterbacks, 50 of it guaranteed. What were your thoughts? Where were you when the signing broke? What were your thoughts when the signing broke, and what were your thoughts on the contract amount?
I think it was the first and foremost, congrats to Baker on finally finding a home after, being bounced around the league for the past year and a half or so. So good for him. I'm excited to have him back in Tampa, but I don't remember where I was. I was on my way to a dinner with the family or whatever and got some drinks. So wasn't able to be there for the news breaking. So everybody else held that end of the deal up, but it was good. I think it's a great spot, a great landing spot, right in the middle of between where the two sides reportedly started, right? So we have the one side saying, probably Baker's side, that we were to come in on the higher side over what Daniel Jones is making at $40 million a year. which they kind of New York kind of ruined that for everybody there by signing Daniel Jones to that type of contract. But then on the other side, the Buccaneers starting around what Geno Smith makes, around $25 million a year. So meeting right there in between at 33.3, 34 million a year. Obviously those first 2 years get the more about around 40. So that's a good look there as well. Overall, I think it's a great deal, ending up there 3 years, being able to get out of it. Like you said, JC, if he does have a down year, is huge as well. But another prove it example for Baker Mayfield, I still got to do this, but good for him. I'm excited. He proved himself last year. Now let's go out and do it again. We got the boys back. Super excited, stoked. I love what Baker brings as a person. I loved him at Oklahoma. Loved him even when he went to Cleveland. So nothing bad to say about the guy. I was kind of worried when he went to Carolina. I was like, hopefully he doesn't start to turn it up here, because we know Baker's got it in him. It's just about being able to find that love for the game again, which he apparently has. That's what he's talking about. He loves the game again. So really awesome. I think it's awesome how all of this unfolded, how he just texted, Jason Licht on Sunday. It was like, hey, are we going to get this done? Like, he wanted to be there. His wife and him are having their first kid, a girl, in April, as we all know. So they weren't really trying to make any moves, especially big moves right now. So I think overall it worked out for both sides extremely well. And the Buccaneers get their franchise quarterback, at least for the next year to 2 or 3.
Yeah, and he was saying too today, they were planning on making Tampa home, so Tampa would be their home base wherever they went. And fell in love with the community. The community fell in love with him. The fans, fell in love with him as well. And it was just it was a perfect fit between, I think, the two, at least for the foreseeable future. Obviously, I think the Bucs will look down the road, depending on how things go, for an heir apparent. Don't expect a high pick at quarterback this year. But when we talked to him after the press conference was aired, that was one of the questions we asked, is kind of like, all right, you've got your deal. What's going? Do you still have that chip on your shoulder? Are you still in that prove it mode, or are you kind of more relaxed? And he's not. I mean, he's still looking at this like, okay, I got it. Now it's time to prove it. And how many times have we seen guys get the big money deal and kind of phone it in a little bit? At quarterback, it's much harder to do that. But he's looking at this like, okay, you put your faith in me, you put your trust, you put your belief in me, and I'm going to go out there and give it everything I got. I think, when he signed that deal, when he got that call that they were going to, he was going to be coming back, he even said, a weight was lifted off his shoulders. They've been bouncing around here or there. They fell in love. And like I said, with the community, they dove right in right away with a charity event that raised, over $60,000 right off the bat, to help inner city kids with literacy and all these other things. So, he wanted to plant his roots here, and that's what he's done. He left a little bit money on the table to do so.
But what's Jason Licht's response to that?
Jason Licht said there's no state taxes, so he uses that one a lot. He said, which was nice. There's a few good one-liners from Jason Licht today, but even Baker said after the Detroit game, that bring a lot of key pieces back. They're going to have to make some sacrifices. And that's what they did. You see the Mike Evans deal. You see, obviously, the Baker deal. Levante David got a little bit of a upgrade in pay, but even, Jordan Whitehead came in a little bit under expected what he was going to get over 2 years. So we'll see if the trend continues with guys like Tristan and guys like Antoine Winfield Jr., what they decide they're going to take on the market. Even Chase McLaughlin, to an extent, he signed that, 3-year deal worth $12 million. You saw what Kami Fairburn just got from the Texans, and it looks like it's steel too. So, the Bucs have done a good job of having all their players buy in and say, all right, we want to run this back. Obviously, we'll add some new pieces to it. Jordan Whitehead being one of them. I'm sure still more to come. But, Baker, Mike, they were at the forefront of this, saying, hey, we could probably get a little bit more on the open market, but we want to come back. We want to run this thing back with these guys in this similar system with Liam Cohen in tow. That's going to be able to kind of be a smooth transition from where they were last year to what they're doing this year.
Yeah, and I mean, it not only goes to show, the type of guys these guys are, that we want them back, right? Like you talk about a Mike Evans, you talk about him being involved in community, you talk about Baker Mayfield getting immediately involved in community along with his wife Emily, and then obviously we know all the work that Chris Godwin and his wife do for adoption animals and everything in the Tampa Bay community too. But
Right.
not only that, but these guys willing to not take the biggest contract, not take a max contract or anything of that nature, because they want to win. They have that mentality of, this is our set goal. This is what we all want. And the type of guys that, they're bringing in or maintaining there in the Buccaneers locker room are exactly the type of culture that, Bruce Arians started to build when he first got here. So it's only going to continue to go from there, and it's looking great.
Yeah. So, Baker was the first domino to fall after Mike. Then after him, you had Chase McLaughlin re-up. Talk about a year he had last year as a kicker, setting numerous records for the Buccaneers. He was only missed 2 field goals during the regular season. Both of them were blocked. He went 6 for 7. One of those blocked field goals was from beyond 50 yards out. Kicked the 57-yarder. It was just steady Eddie throughout the whole season. To get him back in the fold, that was an under the radar big one to have. We obviously know the Bucs and their struggles, right, with kickers. They finally landed on one with Ryan Suckup. But before that, it was a long stretch of guys, second round picks wasted on them, trying to get the right one in there. Maybe giving up a little too early on one of them, and Matt Gay, who's the highest paid kicker. But to get him back, I thought that was a key deal that kind of went under the radar. It'll be interesting to see if they bring back Zach Triner, who is a long snapper. He's 33 years old. They brought in an undrafted guy in Evan Deckers, had him on the practice squad, brought him back when Triner was dealing with an injury later in the season. But do they want to go with a younger option, or, it's one of those things with special teamers, like you kind of don't mess up that group if you've got a good thing going. And some people are on here, who's Zach Triner? And that's exactly my point. You don't know who he is because he's been so good. So it'll be interesting to see if they bring him back. But Chase McLaughlin, I thought, was a heck of a deal for a heck of a player, and solidifies that kicking job for you, for the next 3 years at a good price too, as the cap continues to go up.
Been searching for it for a long time. You spoke on that, JC. Just watching the Buccaneers over the years, it's been like, okay, well, Roberto Aguayo, awesome, second round pick, best kicker in college football history. He's going to come in here and just, beat the brakes off everybody, be the best kicker in the NFL. Right. Absolutely not. Absolutely didn't happen. Thought, Matt Gay was going to be the guy, kind of had the yips and everything, struggles on early in his career, and then got traded. Now he's one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid, like you mentioned. So a lot of struggles. Then you finally get a consistent guy in here, who we had before was not all that bad. But what we struggled in was making those
long range
field goals on a consistent basis, right? Like not one every here and again, or, now we got to actually think about going for it. Now in 2023, we were thinking, just send Chase out there. Why even think about it? Because, we've seen him drill 7 field goals of 50 plus yards. So when we made it to the playoffs, it's no big deal. Just send him out there, because it's pretty much a chip shot for him. So having that, I think pretty much sealed the deal for them, because that's what they were looking for to begin with. A guy who is not only consistent in your regular ranges for an NFL kicker, but at that 50 plus yard margin. So that's a great pickup. At 12.3 million, when I saw it first come in, I was like, whew. I was like, a lot. It's like $4 million for a kicker a year. That's a lot. But then you start, diving a little bit deeper into kicker contracts, and they're not really ones you pay attention to all that much, and it'll kind of shock you. So not that bad of a deal at all. I think Chase is a great guy. Bounced around the league a little bit to begin his career. Played with the Indianapolis Colts before he joined the Bucs in 2023. So really excited to have him back. Hopefully that continuity continues. And for those Bucs fans being like, oh, I don't know who the long snapper's name is, that's what you want. You don't want to know your long snapper's names at all.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, Chase was good, and then they followed up with another Chase. First was Greg Gaines, though, who came here last year from L.A., and was a serviceable back. Played 42% of the snaps, had a sack, but kind of filled in when Vea needed a breather, and when Vea was injured for a few games this season. So I thought that was a good value signing for the price. I think it came in just around $3.5 million. $2 million of it guaranteed this year. So not bad at all for a backup nose tackle, defensive tackle, guy who can rotate in, rotate out, and keep Vea fresh. I still think they look to the draft at that position as well. I think they want to get more youth. When you look at the depth at that position right now, you've got Vea and Cansey and Logan Hall and Gaines back. You got Mike Green as well, who came on as an undrafted free agent. Actually was a tryout player the season before last year, before making the roster, and then contributed a little bit before getting injured and ending the season on injured reserve. But after that, you've got guys like CJ Brewer, Eric Banks. There's kind of like no depth there. And with bringing a veteran back in Gaines and having Vea, I think probably they look towards the draft, maybe in the middle rounds. In my mock offseason, I had them moving back off their first round pick and getting Braden Fisk from FSU, who you know pretty well. But
I
in
like
my
that
first
pick a
mock,
lot.
my first mock draft, I had them going after Christian Boyd from Northern Iowa. So there's some guys in here. It's not deep, but there's some guys I think that can add to that room. But I thought that was a great deal. And there are some people who are kind of like, Chase Edmonds, but for a veteran minimum deal, what he got, I don't think you can do much better. You saw the juice he brought when he was in the game. Obviously, injuries were a big part of last year, kind of hindered him. And I don't think that stops you from bringing another back, especially through the draft. I've kind of outlined one of my favorite guys, Isaiah Davis from South Dakota State. He's a guy who can kind of just get that tough yardage. He doesn't have like long home run breakaway speed, but he can definitely, get those chunk yards. And he's got a rare elusiveness between patience and vision. We can make guys miss, and uber productive at South Dakota State. So, but I like the re-signing of Chase Edmonds. It's kind of a change of pace back. He was good for the locker room. He was good for the guys, good for Rashad, which was really good. Kind of took him under his wing as a mentor type and kept Rashad motivated. And, I thought and kept them level-headed because, Rashad's you guys are on Twitter. You guys are on Instagram. Rashad can get a little you can get a little ahead of himself sometime. I heard him the other day said he wants 2,000 yards from scrimmage, and I think he can do it. I do, but I think there needs to be a little bit of, let's get the system down first, Rashad. Let's see what the line looks like. But he's a great guy, friend of the show, friend of mine. Excited to, whenever I get the chance to talk to him, it's always a good thing. But your thoughts on those two moves? Were you surprised by him? Where you're kind of like, maybe an upgrade at running back instead, or what were your thoughts on those two moves? And then I got some comments in here. We'll get to those too. I see you guys. What's up, everybody? I see you.
I'll try to make it quick then so we get people's comments up here. But both of these are kind of similar moves, right? Like you're bringing back a guy that can help fill a role, whether it's depth or a piece in the locker room that you might need. So starting with Greg Gaines, great piece, was a little bit more productive during his time with the Rams than when he joined us last season. So a little drop off there, but when he did play, he was very productive. Like the stats might not show it, but all the extra stuff, taking on blockers, he was able to get into the backfield. I think even later in the year, you started to really hear his name called out a little bit more on TV and things of that nature. So I think that's a good pickup. My one question for that: do you think that means Will Golson is kind of
on
the way
so.
out? Yeah,
I would say so.
You try to get younger at the spot too, so.
I think they're trying to get younger there. I think, it could be one of those situations on the eve of training camp if they didn't find someone in the draft, or, maybe someone wasn't released or let go or anything like that, around that time. Because remember, they'll pick up an extra like $6.something million. I think it's like $6.7 million after June 2nd, once Shaq's release and Ryan Jensen's release are processed. Or retirement's processed. So they'll pick up some extra money. They'll need a lot of that for operational costs, and I'm sure they'll carry some over. They still got some deals to make, obviously, with Antoine and Tristan to open up some money. But that there could be someone who gets cut or something like that. But yeah, I think the writing's on the wall for Golston. You saw him kind of slow down. He was more of a mentor. Still saw the field a good bit in a rotational role, but I think they want to get younger, faster in that position.
Yeah, that was kind of the word going around from everything that I was seeing. The move kind of is gonna shake him out. As long as he's been with the Bucs and as appreciated as he is, by the crew and the Bucs fans. We appreciate them with everything, but it's that time possibly for those two to separate. So I like the move overall. Gaines a little bit younger, still a veteran though. So being able to be productivity and fill in some of those roles and those depth is good for him. And the same for Chase. What Chase was able to help from a mentality standpoint when it came to Rashad and being able to kind of slow down and let the game come to him rather than try and force the situation, I think really, really was tremendous this past season. Bringing in a veteran like Chase Edmonds, who, could have exploded onto the scene at one point, could have not. We didn't really know what we were going to get out of him. Injuries early on in the beginning of the season, then really started to kind of show some promise there at the end, getting those little spurts for Rashad. He was breaking off 20-yard runs like every 2 or 3 runs. So it was good to see out of him starting to get those fresh legs. So I don't mind bringing it back, but, looking at the running back room now, obviously Rashad, your bell cow RB1. You got Chase as your number 2, and then undrafted free agent last year and Sean Tucker as your number 3. I'm with you there. I think they go and get another guy in the draft. I don't necessarily think that you go and get one in free agency or whatever is actually left in the pool of running backs in free agency right now, because they all have seemed to found homes now. But yeah, you go get a guy in the draft here. There's question marks whether or not, bringing Chase back was the right idea, but that relationship that he's built with Rashad, along with within that Bucs locker room is huge. In just a single season. So being able to have some guys like that were able to do that. Let's keep these guys in here for the longevity of this, see what, arises out of the 2024 season. And then looking at some of the guys in the draft that can help fill a running back role. You mentioned a guy that you liked. I don't think they're going to be available for, a guy like Trey Benson, who is likely going to be one of the first running backs taken off the board, or that they're really going to look, at a running back that early, and a kind of weak running back draft class if you think about it. But maybe like a guy like a Braylon Allen or, Blake Corum in the middle rounds, where you can go and get one of those guys to kind of offset. Chase is kind of a speedster, outside tackles type runner, and then Rashad is balanced, great pass catcher as well. So maybe find a guy that's power, can kind of, big body guy to kind of mix things up between the 3 of them. So I think that would be good, but we'll see what direction they decide to head. I don't know if they want to carry 4 into next season or not. So it's really up to kind of what Liam is seeing on the offense too. We know what Canales wanted to bring in from a staff standpoint in his offense. So I'm sure Liam's is very similar because they run a very similar offense, but it'll be intriguing to see how that unfolds, what they decide to do in the draft, and then we'll know.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I don't think they waste a high pick. I think you're probably talking about 4th or later than that. Obviously, they don't have a 5th round pick. Traded one of their 6th round picks. So unless they make a move for one of those 2 spots, I think you're probably looking maybe that 4th is the earliest they'll go. A guy that's linked to them, Ray Davis, talked to Liam Cohen today after the press conference off to the side and said, hey, there's any guys from your time in LA or your time in Kentucky that, he's like, yeah, there's guys I'm going to mention, guys I know. So you're looking at those, Tevin Wallace's, those, the Devin Leary quarterback.
I was waiting for you to say it.
And then the Ray Davis, those types of guys. So, maybe that's a fit that they go with running back if he's available in that round. So it's going to be weird. I think this running back class, there's not a true number 1. There's not a guy that stands out. There's no Bijan or anything like that. I mean, it's kind of pick your own poison, choose your flavor. What do you want? So we could see running backs get taken in a wide variety of roles. Trey Benson could go in the 2nd round. He could go in the 4th round, and it wouldn't surprise me just because of, people, whatever spice of your life that you want in that moment. So we'll jump into the next 2 signings because they're kind of big. Levante David and obviously the new old one, Jordan Whitehead. But before we do that, I want to hit some of these comments, some of these questions. I see you guys in the comments. I'm going to pick out some of the questions here. We got Clock 5 White asking what edge and cornerback vets, free agents we want to look for, or maybe in the draft. So the edge market's kind of dried up, guys. The big guys are gone. You're talking about maybe some older rotational guys that they could look at. But nothing that really moves the needle. I think they still want to get younger and faster. So I wouldn't look at guys like Emmanuel Ogbah, Randy Gregory, those guys might not be what they're looking for. Yannick Ngagwe, who's still out there. Carl Lawson, could be interesting, but he spent a lot of the time on, inactive last year or injured. Chase Young is a guy who is probably not in their plans, so don't get your hope up for him.
I don't even know if those are really hopes at this point after seeing the way he's playing.
I don't know if it's hopes. It might be delusion at that point. Then you get the older guys who've been productive everywhere they go, and Jerry Hughes and Justin Houston, they're available. You kind of Marcus Golden still kind of produces wherever he goes. Melvin Ingram, Bruce Irvin, those guys are all still kind of hanging around. If I would think if the Bucs were going to look at anybody, maybe some kind of reclamation project, the Romeo Aquara from the Lions, who had 10 sacks a couple years ago. Maybe a guy like Derek Barnett, who was with the Eagles but spent the rest of the season with the Texans. He's only 28 years old. Be more of a rotational role, but there's no one in free agency that you can kind of like look at and say, okay, they're going to start right away. That's going to be your starter. It's someone that they're probably going to battle JTS for the starting spot and maybe a rookie later in the draft. As far as cornerback, there's still some options, but just kind of talking to Bowles earlier today, they really like what they have in Zion McCollum. He said they try to find as many ways to get him on the field. He was kind of like the third starter at cornerback. Obviously started like 9 games for the Bucs last year. There was a lot of good. There was some bad, but definitely things to grow on.
He's improved every single year he's been in the league too, by the way. So the development is there, which is, when you draft a guy out of Sam Houston State, that's what you want to, that's what you want to see, so I don't mind them going that direction. I could see them pulling a guy in the draft, maybe like they usually do.
Yeah, I'll get to some draft options. Free agent options, maybe it's Kendall Fuller, who spent time with the Commanders. He's been kind of up and down injured. Kind of had a good season, resurgent season with the Commanders last season. Maybe Avonte Maddox, who was injured and missed most of the season last year with the Eagles. He's still only 28. He's not going to come on a big deal. It's going to be a 1-year prove-it deal. And he's more of a slot guy, so maybe, you challenge Christian Izien on the inside and give him some competition instead of just handing him the job. I did like Keyshawn Nixon, but he's gone off the board. There's some other lower-end guys that they could look at, but again, I think they give Zion every opportunity to win that job. Now, the tricky part comes with, and it's such a deep cornerback class this year, is that an option? And again, corner guys, kind of look at the roster, even say, oh, we got Zion, whatever. Remember, Jamel Dean has 1 year left on his deal after this year. You always look for the future, and wide receiver, quarterback, obviously number one, but edge rusher, left tackle. Those are your premium 4. Those are your core 4 spots where you're always looking to add premium talent. We've seen the injuries take their toll on this cornerback room since Brady came in 2020. I mean, Richard Sherman was on this team, guys. So like I would not be surprised to see them look at cornerback. I would not be surprised to see them look at wide receiver. With Godwin entering the last year of his deal, but some cornerbacks I like. Kool-Aid McKinstry, I think he was projected to be the top guy, but then, kind of had some bumps and bruises. I still think he's very talented. Enos Rakestraw is a guy that I really like. I had him in my first mock. He's a twitchy corner, can play inside, outside. So if, you have him battle against Zion, I think he's a day 1 starter, but if you have him battle against Zion, he loses that. Now you may have that option to kick him inside as well. He can act as that 4th corner too. Or, that's when you move Izzy into that 4th corner. So there's some spots there in the draft for corner. Edge, man, it's just not good anywhere. They missed out on all these guys in free agency. I thought Josh Uche would have been a really good fit for them. Bryce Huff as well, but that was more of a delusional pipe dream. But I thought Josh Uche, he takes a huge discount from what he was supposed to get to go back with the Patriots, but had 12.5 sacks 2 years ago. So until Belichick just didn't use them. He was in the doghouse. But, the draft, unless a guy like Latte Latu or Jared Verse kind of slips to them, or maybe they move up if he's there in one of those guys are there in a few spots to grab them. The rest of this class, Chris Bradwell's, even the Chop Robinson, he lit the combine on fire, but the technique's not there. The Adisa, Andre Adisa, I think that's his first name, off my memory, from Penn State, the other guy. There's just not a lot there. Certainly not a lot that you're getting a premier number one edge rusher. So it's a tough draft if you need an edge rusher. I thought the Bucs might toy with bringing Shaq back, but he obviously signed with Miami. We'll talk about that too, because there's been 2 guys who have signed elsewhere. We'll get into those signings too. There's always a trade market, right? And Hammy,
I was waiting on this.
Yeah, Hammy 87 Doe says, "Do we move on Sweat? If so, what's the cost? I consider this offseason 10 out of 10 with that move." We'll pull this comment up here.
There's also the other guy on the other side too.
Yes, there's a Hassan Reddick on the other side too. He's a little bit older, looking for a payday. I like Josh Sweat. I don't know if he's in their plans. I honestly don't. I think he'd probably cost at least a 3rd-round pick, if not a little bit more. I think he'd be a great addition. He's only 26 still, turns 27 this year. Had a little bit of drop-off in production, but his pressure rate has just been astronomical. He's got like 200 pressures, over the last 5 years, and I think like 35 sacks. I mean, he's been able to get home and get pressure. I think he'd be a great fit. I think Hassan Reddick would be a good fit, but the problem is both of those guys enter contract years, and they want big money. The problem is with Hassan Reddick is he's already owed big money. So the Bucs would have to eat that and then come to an extension, whereas Josh Sweat is only owed over a little bit over $5 million. That's easy for them to fit on that in that cap space that they have right now. So it's one of those things where do
the Eagles work with you?
Do the Eagles work with you, right? You just mollywopped them in the last round. There's obviously some disdain between these 2 franchises. They're not fans. I want to call them rivals, but as much as rivals can be rivals that don't face each other every year, I think there's a certain level of get up for each of these teams, no matter just because of the history. Then maybe you look at the Nick Bosa situation. I mean, Friday he's due $7 million bonus. Do they want to move off from him? He's still, I think, has a big contract that he's under. I can look it up right now for you guys. But do you want to pick up that contract? Obviously, injuries has been a huge thing for him. Hasn't been able to stay healthy. Do you want to pick up a contract like that? Let me just pull it up here for you guys so I can be a little bit more educated when I talk to you about the contract. But is that something that you want to pick up too? What is the cost? Are we talking like Joe Mixon level compensation here? Or are we talking about, he's 29. His contract was $135 million. It doesn't void out, I think, until 2026. So he's still under contract for 2 more years, this year and next year. Base salary is not that bad. The cap number is not going to affect you because that's going to be eaten by the Chargers. So it's only going to cost you $15 million this year, $17 million next year, roughly, which isn't bad. But again, injuries have been a problem. Maybe someone else pops up out of nowhere. And then there's, the option of trading for him. But I know a lot of people want to upgrade at edge. I think that'd be the biggest spot they need to. But unless they can move up or somehow the board falls their way in the draft, I don't see that happening this year. And they might just have to go with committee and add, maybe a high upside player that they think.
Go get another Washington edge.
So
go get another Washington defensive lineman.
Braylon Trice. I like Braylon Trice in a second, but again, he's not going to be that guy. He's not going to be that number one that comes in and you're like, the Bucs got a premier edge rusher. He's the guy who's going to come in and going to rotate with JTS and battle JTS for that spot and any other veteran. Maybe Marquise Watts steps up. Who knows? All right. We got a couple more questions here. Then I'll get back to all the news. We got Rick Hughes. Where do you think the answer will come from at center? That's a question, right? I think the Bucs would like to upgrade center. I think they would like to upgrade center, at least, the very least, bring in competition for center. But I don't think it's an end-all, be-all. I think guard is a more important position for them. Hainsey was solid. He wasn't great. He wasn't spectacular. In the beginning, he was borderline horrible. But he really came
we were
along.
calling him out every week. I felt like in the beginning.
Yeah, it was. He was in my down and every one of my but he really kind of put it together, and like kudos to him. We knew this was a difficult run system to learn, run scheme to learn, something that he's been complete opposite, running a lot of duo and power and going into more gap and zone and stuff like that. So it was a huge difference for him as far as run scheme. And even Dave Canales said on this podcast during the season, the guys in Seattle, they didn't get it until like mid-season, and you saw the Bucs start to make that stride towards midseason. That's when Hainsey kind of turned it around and got his play going a little bit. So if a Jackson Powers Johnson's there at 26, maybe that's the play. If not, I don't think the Bucs go round one guard. I know everyone's infatuated with mocking Graham Barton to the Bucs right now. He can play anywhere on the line, and I get that, and I think it'd be a good fit. But I look at the track record, right? Tristan Wirfs was the only first-round lineman drafted by Jason Light and his staff. Donovan Smith, Alex Kappa, Ali Marpet, Luke Gedeke, Cody Moak, Robert Hainsey. You go down the line. Demar Dotz? I don't know. But you go down the line, and these are all guys drafted in the second and third round. A lot of these guys were tackles that were switched to inside. A lot of these guys played a little bit of center and this and that. And I still think, potentially the goal is to move Moak to center eventually. So you let Hainsey play out the rest of this year. If you can upgrade him somewhere, definitely bring in some competition, whether it's like a Brian Allen type in free agency or, former Rams center, Mason Cole from the Pittsburgh Steelers that they released this year, or even maybe a Connor Williams with the Dolphins who was in line for a payday before he got injured and might not be ready for training camp. Maybe you get him on a 1-year deal, prove-it deal, kind of to compete with Hainsey and end up taking over. But I don't think it's a huge goal of theirs as far as we need to go, and we need to upgrade this position in the offseason. What say you?
I mean, obviously, with the most recent move that just happened, not necessarily moved by the Buccaneers, but backup guard, backup offensive lineman, Nick Leverett. This is a good segue into that is, Nick Leverett is now heading over towards to the Northeast to end up there in Foxborough with the New England Patriots, signing a deal there. Not sure on the specifics, but obviously not an everyday starter over the course of his 3 years here in Tampa Bay since he came out of Rice. So, him leaving, he wasn't a starter by any means, but he did start 10 games for us in 2022 during Tom Brady's last season. So being able to, have a guy come back of that caliber that has started 10 games in his career as a backup, as a piece for depth, would have been great. Understand why he's leaving. He might be able to get a shot in New England, but likely will head into a similar role, maybe a little bit more money. But with that being said, with him headed off, now you got to look at that guard position a little bit even more, right? Because now you're missing depth there as not only trying to improve, your starter position, but depth as well. So it's something a little bit more to pay attention to. In my opinion, it's a little bit more important right now than figuring out Hainsey and what's going on at the center.
Yeah, I love Leverett. To be honest, I am. You guys know me. I try to stay as biased as possible, or non-biased as possible. Non-biased as possible. As most of you know, the Bucs aren't my team. I didn't grow up with them. The Patriots are my team. So I'm happy about Nick Leverett, but going up there. But Nick was actually, when I first cut my teeth in here, he was my first ever interview. He came in as an undrafted free agent. I came in here with no experience whatsoever. If you guys don't know my story, now's not a time, but I can get into that for you. How I kind of just fell into this field. It's quite crazy. But he was my first interview. So like watching him kind of go and practice squad and then kind of get on that roster and then start 10 games last year while I, had leveled up from Bucs Report to Pewter Report, now to Sports Illustrated last year. I feel for the guy because he was put in a terrible situation last year. I think he should have competed for that left guard spot. But as soon as Jensen was done for the season, you had to have a backup center, and you couldn't afford to have him playing left guard. Something happened to Hainsey, and now you're shuffling two pieces in instead of one. You're moving him to center, moving someone new to guard. So I
God,
thought
that
he
was
got
scary week in and week out, dude. In 2022, it was just like who's gonna go down this week?
right, right. So 2023 comes along. He's thinking that he's competing for that left guard spot, and then Jensen can't go, and now he's relegated to that backup center spot. Too valuable to kind of get in that mix at left guard. So I thought he was given a raw deal. I'm happy for him. The Bucs did not tender him. He wasn't a restricted free agent, so that's why he's able to sign with the New England Patriots. And I think it's a good fit for them. Very versatile, can play all 5 positions, and he'll be a good backup behind David Andrews and compete for one of those guard spots that they have there, because that line was atrocious last year. So good for him. Hopefully it happens, but the Bucs are going to look for depth at the position at guard. They're going to look for a starter at the position at guard. So I would not be surprised to see them bring in a veteran, maybe even Aaron Stinney back. I wouldn't be a huge proponent of that, but a veteran. I like John Feliciano, this guy who I've talked about a few times. I think he'd be good. He's a veteran. He can play guard. He can play center, either side, and he's a scheme fit. Lo and behold, John Lynch brought him in last year to San Francisco. I was like, I don't know if this guy's gonna be a scheme fit, but not only was he a scheme fit, he was one of those old crusty linemen who kept everybody in line and really performed well. So I would love to see him brought in the mix there, as well as a rookie. My guy's Mason McCormick. If you guys have been following me, I love Mason McCormick out of South Dakota State. I think he'd be a great fit. But there's tons of guys there, 2nd round, 3rd round. Christian Mahogany, Christian Haynes, Cooper Beebe. There's a bunch of these guys. Dominic Puny, I think, would be a good fit too. So they've got a lot of options in that 2nd, 3rd round, and I think that's what the sweet spot for them at guard.
I think that's what's up with the importance of that Carlton Davis pick that we got from Detroit, getting that 2nd, 3rd, because that's where they usually like to target these offensive linemen or these corners as well. Right. From Jason Licht's pass in the draft. So
yep, 2nd,
just something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, he loves those guys. And there's plenty of them out there too. A guy like Nehemiah Pritchett out of Auburn, trading one Auburn guy for another. It'd be kind of funny. But we got another one from Jeremy Lowe asking about Cam Akers. FSU guy, you're a Knowles guy as well. What's up with Cam Akers? Is it done? Is it time?
There's flashes. We've seen the flashes, right? And sparing bits and pieces throughout his career in the NFL. He didn't have a whole lot to work with when he was in college at Florida State because he didn't have an offensive line to run behind it. So everybody thought, once he makes it to the NFL, we'll kind of get to see who Cam Akers is supposed to be after being a quarterback / running back in high school. So really weird, career as a whole, having to deal with him. But, then you have the Achilles tendon tear, and that sets his career back a little bit. How is he going to deal with that mentally? Because there was already rumblings that, he was getting into it with McVay. They weren't seeing eye to eye. Like, where was he maturity wise when it came to being in the NFL? So there's a lot of question marks that surrounds Cam from the get go before you even start talking about football, right? And his presence on the field. But overall, I don't think he's necessarily the guy that you want to bring into a backfield that features Rachaad White and Chase Edmonds. I think he's a similar skill set, probably of a mix between the two, maybe kind of a little bit more generic version of a Rachaad White, being able to do everything at a decent level and at a above average level. But with his history, when it comes to
something is mature enough at this point.
Yeah, not necessarily off the field stuff, but things that are off the field, like that has question marks surrounding him. It's kind of the bigger deal to me. Do you really want to bring this guy into your locker room, mess up whatever good stuff you do have going, and not to mention the injury proneness that he has shown to have throughout his NFL career to this point? I don't think it makes very much sense.
Right. The injury history, and then is he going to be okay with maybe getting 3 snaps a game? Maybe he's inactive one day because they have a need at somewhere else. I just don't see it as a fit.
I love Cam. Don't get me wrong. I love Cam. Obviously, Florida State guy. But yeah, I just don't think it's the right move for the Bucs.
Which kind of segues into Bucs Live question about, do you expect better production out of the running game? 31st or 32nd, whatever it was, 2 years in a row, awful. I do. And I think there's going to be some things that are philosophically different. Again, schemes going to be similar, but philosophically different that they're going to do this year that they didn't do last year. I think that Baker's going to have a lot more freedom at the line to make checks and different things. Again, Dave did a heck of a job, and I think the play calling was, it was spotty at times, but for the most part, it was good. But he was the first-time play caller. This is not Liam Cohen's first rodeo. He's called, a couple games in the NFL when he was offensive coordinator, when Sean McVay allowed him to do that. He's called 2 years at Kentucky. So he's got a kind of rhythm, kind of feel of what he wants to do. So I think we'll see a different flow. Baker's going to have the ability to, if it's not there, shoot it, or switch it, at the drop of a dime. Blocking schemes are going to be a little bit different. And they're going to put the guys in a situation to, pick up those solid yards, those chunk yards, and get it going. And I think, again, we saw the production uptick towards the end of the year. It's going to be similar terminology, similar scheme. There's going to be things that they do to help their rushers. I mean, kind of look at, what the Rams have been able to do when they've had healthy backs. I mean, Darrell Henderson looked like a star. He was a fantasy stud for a while. Kyrell Williams, blew up last year. Todd Gurley had very successful seasons in the NFL in that system. So, and with a guy like Rashad who can catch it as well, I think obviously a compliment would be good. I see someone mentioned A.J. Dillon. I think that kind of player is what you want. But I do think they'll see an uptick. I'm not saying they're going to be top 10, but I mean, anywhere between 15 to 20, 22, like that's an improvement. I mean, this identity of this team is going to be receiving. You're going to marriage pass and run. We've heard that last 2 years now. But you got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, even Cade Otton, who played 98% of the snaps, and Rashad White out of the backfield. You're going to be passing with Baker a lot more, but you want to have that consistency to where when you're utilizing play action and stuff like that, which they will a lot, motion a lot, that's going to set up, be even more explosive because you have that threat of a running game instead of the linebackers pausing for a quarter of a second. Now they're paused for 3/4 of a second, because the run game is just that, which allows guys to get behind them, etc., whatever. But Bucs Talk says, who's next to get the bag? Who do you think's next to get the bag, Caleb? I'll let you answer that one first, and then I'll go.
Who's next to get the bag? Well, there's two guys who, I don't know. There's two guys that we need to get stuff done with, right? So those might be the two easy question marks. But if we're talking just strictly free agency, those guys are probably going to be able to hold off for the time being.
I mean, you can include those guys too.
Yeah, but they're not necessarily going to be the first. Obviously, we need to extend Wirfs, and then obviously we are going to work out a deal with Antoine Winfield Jr. or, we probably wouldn't have placed a franchise tag on him. End of the story. So those two are pretty much squared away. We're going to get that figured out. So the question becomes, who is going to be the next guy that we have on the team currently, roster-wise, or free agent? That's a great question. I haven't looked at our updated list of who we need to sign, or who's still free agents. Who's at the top of the list, JC?
Not many people, and no one's getting the bag. I mean, I think
it's like guys, a bag that big.
John Wolford, I think is probably a shoe-in to come back. Although, he turned down two opportunities to go potentially start for a couple weeks until one was with LA. I forget what the other one was.
Yeah, he told him no.
He told him no. Came back here. Came to the active roster. Said he wanted to be in Tampa. He's got roots in Tampa. He wants to remain in Tampa, but. Again, I mean, people are throwing out silly contract money for backups. If someone comes up and says, hey, $8 million to be a backup, does he take that? Or does he take the veteran salary benefit, $1.25 million from the Bucs to be? I think he most likely comes back. I was talking to Liam, he expects to have him back this offseason. So, and then Pat O'Connor, I think, is the next one probably. And then maybe Aaron Stinney, Zach Triner. Like, there's no one's getting the bag next. I think.
So, I mean, if anything, I'm going to say, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say we're going to make a big splash trade for one of the Eagles guys. I'll say I'll say Reddick, or I think Sweat's probably the more likely of the two to actually happen. But if you shore up that edge spot and you go get like a solidified stud per se in the NFL, like
Do a lot of
you're
damage.
sure you're shoring up a big portion of the drop off that we saw from Shaq after his Achilles injury. He came back and was productive, but he wasn't the Shaq that we saw, get
Right.
19 and a half sacks.
10
So
sacks even. Jeez.
yeah, and it's like, all right, like we're missing that. We're missing a guy that can get to the quarterback, push the quarterback back up into the pocket where you've got Vita Veda and Boy is just sitting there waiting for him. So you need that guy who's going to take the pressure off the other edges, the other interior defensive lineman, any other linebackers blitzing too. So I think if you shore that up, Zion's going to do fine in coverage because at that point,
And the pressure.
You've got 3-4 seconds to get rid of the ball before you've got a dude in your face. So that would be lovely. So I'll just go out on a limb and say we get one of the Eagles guys.
I think that's what most Bucs fans want to happen given the market.
I copped out on that one.
But I
too much Twitter today.
Well, when you look at it really, for the edge rusher, I think most Bucs fans, even the uneducated ones that sometimes can linger on Facebook and not read an article but comment on it, they realize that edge rush is a big need, and that's something this Bucs team they don't have. Right now you're starting JTS and the Diaby, and while JTS has looked good at times, the biggest thing, and he's got good pressure. He can drop into coverage as well, but he just hasn't been able to finish. So. Worst case scenario, I don't think you're killing yourself if you think Yaya can deliver what Shaq gave you, last year. Obviously, he led the team in sacks. It's kind of what you had in 2022 anyways, right? Was Shaq and JTS. So I don't think it'd be the end of the world if that's what you're lining up and you've got maybe a second round pick investment or a veteran reclamation project. But I think you're right. I think you need that top tier. That's what the biggest thing this team is lacking. Bowles talked about at the combine, not being able to get pressure from with four, not being able to, disrupt without blitzing and without having to send guys.
I think that was the most obvious thing this year, right? Besides the run game not being good, which we knew anyways. Like I think the biggest surprise to see was like when we rushed forward, we could not get to the quarterback at all. Like there was no example of it watching that we were like, oh, we got four guys going after quarterback. He's going to be back there for at least 7-8 seconds if he really wants to before anybody gets close. So I think that was a glaring disadvantage that we had against teams last year.
Yeah, and I think that's why, Bucs fans, myself included, labeled edge as a big need, but there's nobody out there. So linking them to the Eagles, linking them to maybe a Joey Bosa, trying to link them to another guy who maybe hasn't been so mainstream, I think is the biggest thing. And kind of go with Richard, what we're talking about now is the Bucs need. Who's going to get the bag? But the biggest needs, I think, edge, guard, cornerback, inside linebacker, number 2 tight end, number 3-4 wide receiver. Number two
tight end could become a problem. That could become a problem.
I think those are going to be the ones that you're looking for. Edge is certainly number 1, but Jason Light is in Todd Bowles, are very high on Marquise Watts and what Jose Ramirez did on the practice squad last year. Both of those guys have athleticism, speed. They didn't get as many opportunities. In the case of Jose Ramirez, didn't get any opportunities on the practice squad. Was rewarded with a contract, with a elevation during the Eagles game to give him that, that payout for the playoff week pay. But they're high on him too. So maybe they feel like they've got a decent group. We'll see as it goes on. To answer the question in a long roundabout way, I think Tristan Wirfs is next to get the bag. I just speaking of Tweez wants to get paid, bro. Tweez wants to get paid. He wants to bring back up. He wants the bag, as our good friends Real Bucs Talk would say. He wants that Quan. He deserves it for sure, but I think if anyone's likely to kind of take a little bit less, still reset the market, but take a little bit less, Tristan Wirfs, I think, you can get him. I think the market right now is 25. I think maybe Tristan would do like 25-1, instead of like 27 or something like that. Just hey, I'm the
Yeah.
highest paid left tackle for this season until someone else jumps over it, but still getting $25 million for 5 years, whatever. But they're going to need to do something soon.
Shave a little off the top there. He'll be okay.
Right. They're going to need to do something because they've got to open up cap space. They can open up cap space by restructuring Vita Vea or Jamel Dean. They could do so with Chris Godwin, but they're not going to touch his contract. He's a pending free agent. They're going to want to see what happens. They don't want to do the same thing they did with Shaq, where there's a bunch of dead money lingering from restructuring him. They don't have to. They'd go to Vita Vea or Jamel Dean beforehand. But I think Tristan Wirfs is the next domino to fall. Light talked about it today. Someone asked them, "Hey, boat parade?" He's like, "I think what I said was once we get Light and Winfield done." So we're working on those. I know Mike Greenberg's in a bunker somewhere. Mike Greenberg's in a bunker somewhere, just trying to hammer out contracts and figuring out how to rework the cap. By the way, my goodness, kudos. If you guys don't know who Mike Greenberg is, Jackie Davidson, I know Jason Light gets and you see him on camera, but those two are so instrumental to what the Bucs have done since Brady came here, as far as structuring contracts, restructuring, structuring cap hits out, for them to allow them to kind of figure out things. They've been instrumental and have been even great this year. I mean, getting Mike for $5.6 million on a 1-year cap hit, is just, and not have too much dead money down the road. Same thing with Baker. I think it's 9, huge by them. They're such an integral part on what those guys do. But I think Tristan Wirfs gets the bag next. That's kind of, where I'm at.
When you look at what Mike and Jason have been able to do over the past, let's say 5 to 7 years, it is borderline genius at every single level. Free agents outside of your own team, bringing them in.
Handling your own.
Obviously, great. You nailed the GOAT. Okay, you did that one time, and everybody was like, okay, well, now that's all settled. Not to mention you brought in Shaq Barrett before you brought in Brady at a perfect
drafted time. Evans.
And drafted Evans, all this.
And you look at the last 2 drafts too, have produced 15 starters between drafts and undrafted. The last 2 drafts have produced 15 impactful starters between undrafted and regular drafted. So his ability has been really good. It was a little rough early on there with
finding the money to retain your guys too. On top of that, let's keep our guys here.
Most Bucs fans are killing me killing me with Caleb right now. If I was a Commanders fan who had a bunch of money, or forget it, I'm a Pats fan. So if I'm a Pats fan, I've got need a quarterback, I've got need a receiver, I've got need a linebacker, I've got needed all these positions, right? And I've got over $100 million in cap space, and I signed every single one of these Bucs free agents. I would be ecstatic for this team right now.
Mm-hmm.
And Bucs fans when are we going to make a move outside the you just did. You just signed.
We don't need to.
You just signed 4 of the top 100 free agents on the market. You signed probably the number 2 kicker on the market. You signed the number 2 quarterback on the market. You signed probably the number 2, maybe 3. I think 2 myself. I would put Higgins above him, but other than that, number 2 wide receiver on the market,
and the most consistent wide receiver in the NFL over the past 10 years.
I mean, linebacker, sure. There's probably a couple other people before Levante, just because of his age, though, not because of production. But still,
production goes up for him as he gets older. What are we talking about?
Levante's probably the number 5 linebacker on the market. If you count for young youth, you look at the Blake Cashmans and the Jordan Brooks, guys who are younger and stuff like that. But as far as production, you got top 5 at every position that you brought back. For the big guys, obviously Gaines and Chase don't count, but some Bucs fans need to open their eyes and be like, damn, you just got a haul. And not only that, you still got cap space to spend. And we haven't even talked about him yet. And we're running out of time here, so we're going to touch on him briefly. But Jordan Whitehead, the Bucs got Jordan Whitehead back, and on a cheap deal, 2 years, $9.5 million with the ability to get up to $11 million. That's a good deal for a safety that knows the system, can bring that heat, down. And again, Bucs fans I need you guys to understand a second. The same Jordan Whitehead who was here, who infuriated you in coverage at sometimes. Now he's gotten better there, but missed tackles. He's still the same guy. So some people were like, "Oh, good, go to the New York Jets. You missed too many tackles, or you're not great in coverage, or whatnot." He's still that same guy. He's gotten better in coverage. You know, he had 4 interceptions last year. 3 of them came in week 1, and then he only had 1 the rest of the season. So he's not like a ball hawk all of a sudden. But he can bring the lumber, lay the wood, sets a tone, and he's going to be a good fit next to Antoine Winfield Jr. And a good, they've got good guys to rotate in and out of them with, Zion at that position who can, when they've got obviously Izzy, they've got Merriweather who performed well 2 starts last year. So they've got some good, they've got a good safety tandem, but again, like, he's not like,
I mean, he's a twitchy, instinctive player, right?
Yeah.
Like let's call it what he is. He plays off his instincts.
Kyle Hamilton or Jesse Bates, like, by any means.
No, he's got all this, like, I gotta do something type mentality, right? Like, he's got to be involved in a play, so he's always going to find himself around a play. That's why he's always around the ball. But if he makes the play or not, that's to be a question. But I mean, he did have that one game with the Jets last year where he had 3 interceptions or whatever. That was crazy, but only had 1 the rest of the year. But that was his career high in interceptions. So that's great for him. Bringing him back. Obviously, we saw what him and Antoine Winfield were able to do in that Super Bowl run, especially when Winfield started getting more playing time towards the end of the year during his rookie season. And that was the second best year of Winfield's career before he was moved into a nickel type situation, following that season in 2020. So a lot of different changes. We're kind of back to where we were. So I think those 2 pairing back up to each other is only going to benefit our secondary even more. And that bringing in him is huge, because now you don't have to worry about safety. You could, pay attention to corners.
Right, you can a little bit later and everything like that.
Yeah.
But I want to address something that realtor David Zussman, and I'm not going to argue with you too much on this point. The 2022, I will argue with you all day because I think you're completely wrong on that one. But you said good but not genius. 2021 draft was absolute horrible. That was coming off the COVID year first off. So I agree. JTS did not pan out the way you wanted to, but if you looked at the prospects, and again, you got to just not look at the draft. Don't just pull up the draft and say, oh, this person XYZ was taken behind them. If you look at the draft, what the Bucs kind of didn't have many needs on that team, and getting a rotational edge rusher, they bought in on Joe Tryon-Shrika's athletic traits, the size, the speed, the ability, and what he could potentially become. And I think at pick 32, like, that's something that in that draft specifically, coming off the COVID year, I think that was a gamble that was worth taking. Now, it certainly didn't pan out. JTS isn't a bust. You can't call a guy who's been a rotational player, has 5.5 sacks the last 2 over, each last 2 seasons as a bust. He's a rotational player. He's around 32 pick. Look up other guys in that draft that were taken earlier. I
don't think he was expected to come in and be that guy either.
Right. And remember, his first year was a mess because he was sitting behind JPP, and that was when Arians was still on. If they're paid, they're played, instead of, and JTS was like, he was like at this part held up by like tape and string and still out there trying to play. He had like arm injuries and all leg injuries, groin injuries all over the place. And they had him playing a different spot. And, he finally kind of got that opportunity year 2, which was 2022, to be the starter. And then Shaq goes down midseason. So now there's more attention to him because no one cares about Anthony Nelson on the other side. And that's how he got 5 sacks that season, So, I mean, the next, and then, it's kind of what it was. And this season, yeah, disappointment. I will say definitely disappointment. He got benched, but he wasn't a bust by any means. 2nd round pick, you got Brady, you draft a quarterback. Always be drafting quarterbacks. It is what you should do. At least every other draft you should be, and you should be drafting a quarterback, whether it's high or whether it's low. The Patriots did that over and over and over again. And they got awesome returns for, Matt Castle went on to have a long career. Brian Hoyer went on to have a long career. Jacoby Brissett went on to have a long career. Zach Robinson's the coach of the Minnesota Vikings. Jimmy Garoppolo went on to have a long career. There's another guy who's Zach Robinson is the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons. always be drafting quarterbacks. I think you should always be developing them. And at that point in time, if you look, maybe there's one or two guys that could have helped you, but really you were preparing for life after Brady. At that point, you didn't know how many years he had. I think that was a good pick. I really do. I don't think you could go really anywhere else with that. And then certainly Robert Hainsey started 2 seasons for you. So not a terrible draft. Keyshawn Vaughn was terrible, and everybody else after that, you're taking flyers on guys in a COVID year. Good luck, you know.
And you got Darden for a few years, who's your punt returner.
Yeah, Darden was, he was terrible. He would run out of bounds, scared of contact, but KJ Britt.
Yeah, KJ Britt's probably your
starting linebacker. So 2021 had some dark spots, and obviously, and Jason Light just said it. There were times last year that Trask was ahead of Baker until Baker kind of flipped the switch and turned it on. Trask was winning.
Well, we all saw it. We all saw it in training camp.
Yeah, exactly. We all saw it in training camp too. Trask was great. So 2022, you're off your rocker, dude. Logan Hall he took a step last year. Still would like to see a lot more from him, especially towards the end of the season. The push-pull to being able to shed blocks, make some tackles in the run game. Would like to see more of that explosiveness in the pass rush that they drafted him for, but certainly took some steps from the year prior. Luke Gedeke finished out as a top 25 tackle in the league, regardless of side. So you got a good one there. Rashad White, over 1,500 yards rushing. Kate Otten was 98% of the snaps. Jake Camarda had over a 50-yard per average punt. Punt rate average. Like, you got some studs. Zion McCollum is probably a starter next year. Like, you got some.
Don't forget,
studs.
Camarda was also a NFC Special Teams Player of the Week.
Yeah, I mean, you've got some studs out of 2022, but I digress. We went over the hour that we're supposed to be on here, you guys. I love doing live today. I really did, being able to chat with you guys, and kind of let the conversation flow. Not so much as where I had it going, but kind of where you guys wanted to go, and still kind of touching on the points that I wanted to bring up for sure. I guess my question to you to finish out the show is, it doesn't have to be necessarily a free agent. Grant Stewart. Yeah. Grant Stewart fetched him a 6th round pick that got them somebody.
Yeah. Was he 6th or 7th rounder?
He was a 7th rounder. Got him a 6th round pick. Then he drafted, I forget who with him, but he made an impact. So maybe it was Josh Hayes, who led the league in special teams tackles last year. Yeah, you're getting contributions.
I did not know that at all.
Yeah, Josh Hayes out of Kansas State came in, Kansas State, and led the league out in special teams tackles as an undrafted rook, as a 6th round rookie. So
it was Grant Stewart, and he was drafted alongside Chris Wilcox.
Grant Stewart was drafted. Chris Wilcox had one of the best RAS scores of all time at the combine. He went to the Colts and then flamed out. They claimed him on waivers, final cutdowns, and then Grant Stewart was traded to the Colts for, I think, like a 6th round pick. It's like Grant in a 7th for like a 6th round or something like that. And I think that's the pick they used to get Josh Hayes with last year, or maybe that was 2021, 2022. I don't know. I don't have it in front of me. Well, I was going to say, to finish the show up, what's one move you think the Bucs need to make? Doesn't have to be necessarily a player, but where do you think they go next? Where does Light move next without like re-signing their own guys? Where do you think they go next with their next move? You can just give me a position if you got a specific guy in mind.
You're forcing me to have to pick edge because of the earlier question. Like, who's getting the bag? It's got to be an edge.
Well, it might not be. The next guy might not be an edge.
It doesn't have to be a bag. And it doesn't have to be a bag either. I got to remember that.
Doesn't have to be an edge they sign. It could be, any position. Who's the next domino? Could be one of their own. Who's the next domino to fall for the Bucs?
I'll go Pat
O'Connor. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to go with the guys. I think John Wolford's probably the next guy. Pat O'Connor. I don't think anyone's knocking down the door for Pat. I think he'll be back, even if it's on special teams. He loves the place. I mean, he just went on vacation with Vita and Sue. They went to, I think, Antigua with their girlfriends, and
everything's a locker room thing this year. Like, it's like, how can we maintain this culture that we have? Yeah, it's just maintaining what we have, keeping this group together because we know how good they can be. Now, can we reach a ceiling that's even above that? So
Right.
the most important thing, obviously, is they came out swinging, keeping our own guys. That's what we want to do. So continuing to do that, just stay on your yellow brick road, and don't turn left when you should go right.
Right. So I think John Wolford probably the most likely one in house. I'll give you an outside free agent too. Let's go with center Brian Allen, formerly with the Rams. They cut him this year. He's only played in 7 games the last 2 years, but started the year they went to the Super Bowl. I think if he's healthy, he can push Hainsey. Obviously, familiarity with working with Kevin Carberry, the offensive line coach, and also Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator. So I think that he might be a next domino to fall. I think they need to get in some veteran O-line depth. And I think center is more likely than guard at this point. I hope an edge rusher comes along. I love Josh Sweat. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that Hassan Reddick, I know I posted some things on there. Rashad White's playing GM. He goes, "Who do you want me to get next?" I said, "Josh Sweat from Philly." LOL. It's blown up. But
you're just gonna have Rashad quote tweeting everybody's stuff. Like,
right.
come on through. Come on.
And then I just Googled Josh Sweat Bucks, and it came up that he was, oh yeah, we had a conversation with the Bucks during the. I'm like, oh, maybe. But I don't think so. I don't think it's likely. They have to give a pick. They'd have to give up money. I don't see that happening. Again, I think you're probably looking at maybe a Derek Barnett or someone that doesn't really move the needle as terms of, a guy who's going to be the guy, but someone who can come in and compete with those young guys and maybe a second, third round pick, in the draft or something like that. So I'll give Brian Allen, I think, could be a next one outside their own. But I think Carberry's an upgrade. Just to answer the final question, Grizz, I do think kind of things got stale a little bit. I think it's going to be good for these guys to hear a new voice outside of Goody and Gilbert, although I love those guys. Caleb, we were at training camp together a few times, and I told you, man, I love listening to these guys coach. They're just old school, cussing at them, just rough, crusty, old offensive lineman coaches, but with hearts of gold. I love them. Finishing out Connor Williams, I think he could be a possibility. He's gonna have to take a prove it year deal. I don't know if he's gonna be ready in time for OTAs or mini camps, and I think he's gonna have to sign a prove it year deal. And if he wants to do that to battle somebody instead of have a real opportunity to start, maybe potentially that's with the Bucs. But I do think they'll make a move at center, likely in free agency, but potentially in the draft. My latest mock on my battle plan, I had them taking Tanner Bartolini from Wisconsin in like the 6th round. Maybe they look at a guy later in the draft. If again, JPJ is a big one, but we'll see. We'll see what they do. But that's going to close it out for us. Maybe we'll go live next week too. I don't know. I got to talk to my producers, see how they felt about it. We went a little over. I always go over. I tell my guys, they know I'm notorious.
I would say it's better to go over than go under.
Right. It's better to go over than under. But before we do that, Caleb, you have a chance. Floor is yours. Promote yourself. Tell them where they can find you. Tell them what you're up to over at Bucs Game Day. He's on top of the Tom Brady post always. So what else you got cooking over there?
Yeah, I'm the unfortunate Tom Brady news guy over at Bucs Game Day. Every time that there's any TMZ worthy-esque Tom Brady news, JC is sure to hit my DMs with that and let me know that I need to write it. But no. Yeah, my name's Caleb. Last name Skinner. You can follow me on Twitter at CHS I am a writer and reporter there for Bucs Game Day, part of the Fan Nation group under Sports Illustrated. So that's awesome. Also a writer for Men's Journal, On-Campus Report, which we cover all sorts of different college sports news, not just college football news, but obviously a majority of that is going to be your college football news. That's, what really drives college sports other than what college basketball. We're getting into March Madness and stuff right now. So probably be a good time to head over there, covering a lot of Cooper Flag with Duke and all that stuff too. I'm sure JC's a Duke fan, like he is a Patriots fan. Bandwagon type deal going on. I'm just messing with you.
College sports don't exist up in New England, bro. We don't care about any of them. We've got pro teams that win regularly or had won regularly for a while. They're always competition. So like everyone's like, "Oh, you're an BC Eagles fan?" I'm like, "What's the BC Eagles, bro?" They don't pay attention. Like unless you're a hockey kid, then you follow like the Bean Pod and like Maine and UNH and like BC and BU. The Terriers.
Hey, BC's got Bill O'Brien now, dude. You got.
I mean, you watch those teams if you're a hockey kid, but. I didn't grow up playing hockey. That's only if you like grow up playing hockey and you're like, oh, the Bean Pot. I went to one, but it's not like I come down here and everyone's like, oh, I love this college team. Oh, go. You say one word, it's sacrilegious. You say anything about BC up there, no one gives a shit.
It's not like you walk into the Panhandle of Florida and talk about Florida State.
People go to UMass for the partying, not for the football. I'll tell you that much.
That's fair.
No one cares about BC.
But anyways,
no one cares about Harvard football even less. You talk about BC football.
Does that really shock you at all?
So yeah.
Anyways, y'all can follow me on Twitter. Go check out some of my articles over there on bucsgameday.com. We're doing some great stuff over there. Just added our lead editor and lead writer there in River Wells, formerly with USA Today, writing. Yeah, he was a guest appearance on the Sick podcast last week with JC. So go check that out as well. But right now I'm living with my parents. I had to move back for a little bit of time being, but hoping to get out of here in the next 2 months. So y'all stay tuned. I'll keep you updated on all that too. So my personal life is just as big as my professional life. I'm not afraid to share. So y'all can dog on me all you want in the chat.
Nah, no dogging. I mean, nowadays, who can afford a place? I can barely afford a place. I'm not going to age myself right here.
You're married. You're married with a few kids.
It's just hard, bro. It's hard out here for a working man. I'm just trying to do this full time professionally. I got bills and shit. I just changed the whole rating of this podcast with that loud. Cut that out when you go to repost this. We're out of here. I'm JC Allen. You're on the Sick Podcast Network. Pirate Parlay. Check me out, JC Allen, NFL on Twitter X. Y'all know the deal. What the hell do we call it? Check out Pirate Parlay and all of our great work over at Sports Illustrated Bucs Game Day. We're pumping out content. We've got these pressers that we're at. We've got more pressers tomorrow. If you didn't know, cat's out of the bag. We're getting Chase McLaughlin, Chase Edmonds, and we're also getting Jordan Whitehead tomorrow, all speaking with the media. Next week, we're going to have Levante David, and who knows who else are going to be back to talk to. So we'll have even more content coming for you, just coming down the pipeline, like throwing dollar bills in the skies. That's going to do it for me. It's going to do it for Caleb. We appreciate you. We appreciate you guys. First live show. You guys showed out, came in with the comments, came in the energy. We'll do this again for sure. Certainly. And don't worry, I got some great guests lined up. We're going to do some draft stuff soon after a couple free agents. We're going to get some more players on, talk to some guys. We're going to get some more guys on. Just wanted that first wave of free agency. Let them enjoy the first couple of weeks of offseason before I start hounding on them to come on here. But we got so much stuff down the pipeline. We're going to bring it to you live right here every week on the Pirate Parlay podcast. Again, I'm JC. This is Caleb. We're out of here. Peace.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Pirate Parlay on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.